Hello.
Yay! Y'all are awesome.
Who's clowning around? We'll just wait a few minutes for people to come on in. Oh, Eleanor's going to town. Okay. I think we're pretty good. There's enough people in the room to get started. Can people hear me okay? Yeah? All right, right on. Hello, and welcome to our, what is this? Welcome to class. I'll just say welcome to class. It's good to see you all. To those I can see, feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel able to, but no worries if you're in a spot where that doesn't make sense. Okay, so here we are in sort of, I guess, the third week of our kind of partnership structure with Connect. Week 13, I hear from the chat. Yeah, today's kind of nicely like a day that we don't have, we don't have some fire hose information that we're trying to give to you today, which can be nice to have actually some time just to kind of process and talk with one another and kind of move towards starting to create prototypes. So what we have on deck for today's class, I'll drop in, or so maybe someone will drop in the link to the outline, so it's easy reference so people have it. But essentially we're going to do a bunch of different small group and large group work. As you all probably remember, last week we did kind of, you had a big assignment essentially to kind of come up with this brief, and Roshani made this great structure for that, this sort of Google form. And so what we're going to do first is just individually, we can do it kind of, in the same Zoom world, but essentially it'll be kind of self-directed work. We're going to look over those answers and sort of see all the thoughts that we had. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is just kind of look over those things on our own. Then we're going to break out into small and randomized groups to actually talk about them and sort of pick up the pieces that really leapt out to us as something really interesting, something that seemed kind of juicy to dive into as what might actually be what you'll tackle in your small groups. Then we're going to pop back into a larger group, discuss that, kind of lift up like the 3 to 7 kinds of projects we want to look at in more detail. And then you're going to break out into duos, which I've been wanting to do forever. And finally, we'll have a chance to do it today. So you're going to have one-on-one conversation with someone, again, just random in the class, to just check in about sort of like all the ways that this class has been connecting or not connecting with you, and how it's kind of relating to your practice. And then after that, Roshi and I will have taken all this information during this small break and formed you into teams. And then you'll have some time just to work together as a team and come up with a strategy for like what you want to do this week. Because basically from here to whatever week, week 16, you're going to be working in those small groups again, producing prototypes in a similar-ish model to what we did with Village Skate Park. Though I'm sure as happened last time, you have your plan for what you think will happen, and then then life unfolds, and we'll do something else entirely, I'm sure. But we'll kind of start with this as our structure. To kind of be working in small groups again. So before we jump into like checking out everyone's answers, do people have any thoughts or questions or any sort of feelings they want to throw out into this large group space before we all spend some time reading?
Can I just share an appreciation
Yeah.
for everybody for completing the form and like being there's just some really good stuff in there, and just really appreciate it. It's helpful for me in Rosten, so thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and y'all did really excellent work kind of taking these themes deep. So I think Roshani or someone in the class staff, would you drop the link in? I guess I have it here, but I just want to make sure it's the right one, to the answers, or everyone's answers.
It'll take me a second.
I think I have it.
Yeah,
Well, wait a second.
you should be able to share.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. All right. So in the chat, I just dropped in a Google Doc, and I'm just gonna, as sometimes do, I'm just gonna put on some tunes, and we're gonna spend really kind of a decent chunk of time, about 30 minutes, just reading through all these answers because there's a lot in there. So we're just gonna read over all of it, and I want you to maybe, if you have a piece of paper or some way to take some notes, kind of pull out the things that are like really speaking to you, the ways that different folks in the class have answered these questions. And we'll feel free to turn your camera off while you're reading. We'll kind of keep the Zoom channel open while we do this. So if people do have questions or want to like just speak into it or have anything they want to say, that is totally possible. Sound good? Okay, let's dive in. Okay, just a little time check. Are people feeling ready to move into conversation? Are they wanting a little more time? Feel free to make a reaction gesture in the Zoom interface or drop something in the chat. Thumbs up means you want more time or you're ready. Also, feel free to just say whatever you want. I think thumbs up must mean
thumbs up for me was feeling ready.
Okay, cool. I realized I was not very clear about like what these gestures might mean. Okay, cool. Looks like some people are feeling ready. I thought one thing that we might do before breaking out into our smaller groups is I had a thought that maybe there'd be a moment where folks who maybe felt like they had discovered something of general interest to the group about Connect, because obviously there's a lot of questions about their business model or what their needs are right now. And I know a bunch of folks have had some side conversations and have had additional kind of interactions with Kiyomi. So I don't know if anyone had any thoughts of like, here's another little bit that maybe not everyone might be aware of about either the neighborhood, the Connect itself, or the situation generally. Is there any last bits? And if not, that's fine, but wanted to make a little space for it. I forget who it was, but I remember sort of hearing someone having a fairly long conversation with Kiyomi about sort of like refurbishing a church space or something like that. And I thought, things like that are like interesting kind of like details about their space needs and things like that.
I think that was Colleen. I don't think she's here right now.
Oh, okay. Do you remember any of the bits of that, Roshani?
I don't know if I do.
All right.
There's this thing about like Atlanta giving away buildings. Is the city of Atlanta giving away buildings? Does anybody know about this? And Colleen, oh, I don't know about this, but Colleen was connecting the dots because like Kiyomi does know this. How to they're like, oh, I want to say fire things, fire buildings, fire stations. It's a city of Atlanta giving away buildings, and Kiyomi knows about this, and Colleen was connecting the dots. That's what I know.
Okay. Cool. All right. We can add that general idea into our kitty. So yeah, so there's tons of different directions. I took a bunch of notes, some really, really great ideas. I thought what we'll do now is go into groups of about 5 people each and just sort of bring up kind of like which of these ideas started to resonate with you. As before, I think I saw some really clear clustering in terms of audiences or kind of types of projects. That seems like that could be really worthwhile trying to figure out, like, if we made a cluster out of like these 5 ideas, what might that look like? What's the general direction that those people were heading in? As before, what I'd love to do with these small groups, I know it's been a minute since we've done our Zoom protocols, but I'd love for each group to come up with a timekeeper, and someone who's going to be like sort of the note taker. So before you do any other conversation, figure out who in your group is going to do each of those roles. And then I think we'll just I'd like to try to do is kind of like round robin, have people speak in the circle, taking less than 5 minutes. The timekeeper can kind of stop someone at 5 minutes if they get to that point, but then just keep on going around, bringing up sort of like what was of interest, which of these ideas really leapt out at you. And then I think, another thing that was a kind of common theme is I think a lot of people were really hungering for like more information. So if there's things that like your group is like, okay, we really have to figure out X or Y thing about the neighborhood or about Connect's model or whatever, really try to kind of focus that and distill those questions so that we know, maybe we can even answer them today in our groups together. But if not, we can answer them this week with the help of the neighborhood and Connect. People feel ready to go into their small groups? Okay, Gina, will you send us?
Oh, and we're doing the notes in the Rise Up pad, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Let me drop that link in again.
Thank you.
Okay, here is your Rise Up pad. Oh wait, it says, Okay, sorry. I just sent that to the waiting room participants, of which there are none. Okay, if you will see the link.
Ready?
So make sure to click that before you go to your breakout group, because I think it will be lost to time once you're sent over there. Okay, I see some people in there. Cool. All right, let's do it.
Ready? Okay, here we go. Hope, have you received a invitation? Welcome back. Hi. Hello, welcome back.
Hey, friend.
How was everyone's chat?
It was pretty good.
Good.
Hello. feel like all classes should be Halloween classes. I just think costumes in a Zoom meeting really adds some spice. Um, is this everybody? Are we all back, or are there still people getting sent over here?
It should be everyone.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, welcome back to our big room. Hopefully your small room was stimulating. So we're gonna kind of be toggling back between like big and small rooms for all of class really. And whereas I think, we can kind of get a little deeper into conversations in the small rooms, I think the big room can be really useful to kind of start plucking out like really major themes, and basically, I guess also, I should have said this at the beginning, though I kind of implied it, like where we're trying to go from like the beginning of this class to the end of this class is like, we want to go from like, basically we all had individual like ideas and thoughts and instincts from our last 2 weeks of explorations. But now in this class, what we want to leave here with is we want to be clustered into a group where we feel like, okay, here's my team. And then we want to be able to give basically a compass heading to each of those teams saying, okay, here's a direction to kind of start exploring as a team. This is probably slightly too much information right now, and I'll repeat it over and over in class, but it's like, even once you're in your team, like, I don't think that our goal necessarily has to be that like, and that team all makes a single project together, as long as you all are kind of moving in the same direction. Like, it could be like, well, I want to make like whatever, this map of vacant properties, and I want to make this like, design for like a former school building, but they're all about sort of how does the connect expand into the community or something like that. So there's ways to kind of even make sub projects within your team. So I think, and I think, I could be totally wrong, but my guess is that I know at the skate park, what sort of happened is like everything got collapsed into like one mega project. I think that this one is probably more likely to be like, we're all going to kind of be pursuing these different ideas, and being able to present our partners with like these really interesting directions is going to be the real value of our kind of imaginations in this class. I could be totally wrong. We'll see where it goes. Roshani. Roshi's like, you're totally wrong.
Well, I do want to add one thing, that part of the value of this class, which I think y'all have already like shared and showed up for, is that you have to learn how to collaborate with each other. And so even though you might not be making one thing together, we hope that you just don't go in your own little like path, even though you are in the same direction, and like you do put into consideration what the planners are thinking about, or what the government staff are thinking about, because that's what happens in the real world, and that's what we want you to experience through this class. So just wanted to add that.
Totally. Right on. Okay. So for the next, oh, good. Was somebody saying something? No. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do for the next 20 minutes or so is just have this like in a larger conversation of like in your small group, and we didn't really elect spokespeople or anything like that, but just feel free to throw out some stuff that came up in your small group. What were some of the directions where like there was some excitement, or maybe an idea kind of forming in between the different smaller ideas? Were there places where there were kind of interesting synergies or resonances happening in your small groups? Now's a great time to kind of name them, and those things just will basically become the fodder for when we go to this break for Roshi and I to kind of quickly assemble sort of like themes and group members. So what came up? What were the ideas that got traction in your conversations?
I'll talk for our group, or say some things from our group, or
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay. I think like one thing that we like really collectively sort of started just really focusing on was that these were two very like powerful entities, and they were great in their own respects and amazing things, but how could we like bring them together? and have them not only share resources with one another, but start maybe like building a collective model to share resources with other organizations who may need more empowerment in growing their communities and things of that such. So whether it be like a collective forum on a couple of days where they can come and gather and share resources and connect and build in this way in space that no longer like separates them, but sort of like brings them together.
Anyone else want to throw out what their group was talking about?
I think one thing that our group talked, the buzzword that kept popping up was sustainable and sustainability. How are these models? How can you sustain these models? I think there was one thing, and like I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the buzzwords, keywords that kept coming up in our conversation. And potentially, like, how do we create a model that can be applied to different areas within around the metro?
Come on, y'all.
We talked about that some too. And we talked about how like physical space can be something to help with sustainability. Because if you own kind of the space that you're in, your landlord can't kick you out. So we talked about kind of some examples of like shared spaces or like a market area or like a building or like a space that's designated for these businesses where they can come together and they can sell their products or where people can meet. And that's like a way to kind of help with collective ownership and kind of to fight displacement too, because you own it collectively, but you can't be displaced from something that was designated for you or that you own.
I think one of the things that our group talked about, and I can't tell if this is working. Can you guys hear me?
Totally.
Okay. So one of the things our group talked about was like that it was a little hard to like pinpoint the main mission of Connect, I think for a couple of reasons, maybe because like they're still figuring that out or because they're intentionally agile. And then the other thing was that like they're not really looking for like so much of like outside funding, but they're looking for more like really truly mutual aid among the members of the cooperative and the community. And I think another thing that like came up in that discussion was just like the need for like a real needs assessment like from that community and from the collaborative, because we don't fully understand what their like real intimate needs are. And I don't know, that got my brain thinking of like maybe there's some sort of like art project or like workshop day we could have even with the members of the collaborative to do like a needs assessment, but in a fun, interactive, like sort of way. But I don't know, those were the themes we talked about and where my brain went with it.
It's great.
We talked about in our group, like pandemic businesses, like the interesting part of like these need-based businesses which came during the pandemic, which are still filling a need. We spoke about like the pros and cons of a membership model as a way of like having consistent income or funds coming in. We talked about there's some like structural needs that they have, like with those two front spaces off to the side with the murals on them aren't finished. Like they're trying to get a system in place for allocating time, which we're thinking about that in correlation with like membership model, like So there's like some technology needs around that, which I don't know if they're quite there at yet, but could be helpful. And then also like the challenges of being a 5-year-old like nonprofit businesses, like shifting staff members, trying to get like systems in place and stability while also being able to adapt. And that's like an interesting place for like that type of businesses to be in, and they might both be at the same place, which could affect like making a model, but could also be very interesting in like their problem solving, and that information is needed.
Could I get you to say a little bit more about that? So they talked about some sort of mural spaces that were open, and then there was a question about sort of how to allocate like time around those murals.
Oh, there's 2 rooms off to the, like when you walk in through the front door on the left-hand side, there's 2 like spaces which have a sliding door, and those are supposed to be like breakout rooms or off like mini offices, and they're not quite finished, so they're not in operation. One of the issues is figuring out how to allocate time for those spaces, especially if they're not charging for them. So they haven't figured out a system with that yet. So that would be helpful, like a structurally helpful way for them to like get the use out of space that they already have.
Right on. Okay, cool. I'm glad I asked. Now I understand.
One of the things that our group had talked about was how they always seem to be in a constant response mode or emergency response mode. So do they have the time to really identify the needs of their surrounding community, the underlying needs that are constantly there? And at the same time, their operation model is really in that like response mode, that they seem to grow from that they like to do that. It's not something they want to stray from. And they want to be an organic collective ownership type of decision-making process. But at the same time, when they're doing that, do they have that time to identify that that input from their community, and how could we help in that sense?
Yeah.
I think it was Hiroko also mentioned in our group, making sure that we are using the like the assets that we have in our group as best as we can for the benefit of the organization. She mentioned specifically like not just the artists that we have, but also like the folks connected in government and policy, to especially for this collaboration. I think she was remarking, Hiroko, if you wanted to speak more about it, but she was remarking that like, this group has a lot to offer. So maybe leaning into that side for this collaboration.
Yeah, I think it's like something like really important, right? That we have these people like, Stephen, when you wrote about like how they're rezoning, and I don't know all about the rezoning. Do you think that, I don't think like a lot of people know all about the specificities and like what are the ways in which you can like leverage it now by knowing, and what are those connections, and maybe not even writing policy, but like how do you get to that point, or like outline something, right? Becoming aware more of like these new developing things, and being able to have increase those resources and use already existing connections of people in this program, because I always find that that's like it's like easier to like connect with the arts. It's less easy to connect with local agencies sometimes and have them as a captive audience, right? And like an active participant. So I think there's something about that, because that's something that I felt like could have been a greater part of the work with the village, like, you know, part of, yeah, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Kara, what you said about the response mode kind of made me think about this, and I just want to raise this as another point of view, but because it doesn't seem like it's been said yet. But you know, both of these communities are communities of color. They are working in models that are anti-capitalist because capitalism has harmed their communities. And I just remember Kiyomi saying that, like, I'm tired. And so there is this thing where they're taking care of each other, they're responding, they're doing this rapid response stuff, but that's an impact on their nervous system, right? And where does care show up? Where does trust show up? Where are those things? Like, there's already some kind of community collective care that's happening, but like, is there something that can be created that rest and like other kinds of healing care can be offered? Because I think it was Haven that mentioned something on her thing about like repair and healing too. So it's just making me think about like, could something of like healing and repair and care be offered?
My camera's not on. The reason I had said that, Roshni, in my kind of like brief and pitch was specifically the conversation we had at the Connect when we talked about how, policies, generally have been at the disadvantage and harm of a lot of communities of color, and specifically talking about like the placement of I-20 in Atlanta, and how it really harmed a lot of the business acumen and ability of like the Black businesses and communities in Atlanta. And so thinking about like, yeah, the Beltline's starting to come through there. We're working on reconnecting this area that's been like disconnected to its disadvantage, but it's being reconnected, but it's risking the communities that have been there historically for decades. And so really thinking about like, how do we integrate with the new development that's coming so they can reap the benefits and not be displaced was kind of really broad. I don't know like any like concrete way at the moment to think about that, but that's really where my mind had gone during this.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of really rich themes here. I think what you just said, Haven, maybe this is because this is what you wrote in the survey too, but it was reminding me of like, so it seemed like a few different folks had this idea of, is there some way to kind of like have a project that for whom the audience is kind of people who work in government, to help them see more clearly the ways that like their work has created problems, and sort of, and maybe some way to, and that was very clearly part of like Kiyomi's sort of take, is sort of like, I'm not really sure that I think of the government as like a partner so much as this thing that I have to kind of like deal with. And, and I think, obviously that's a long-term goal, is like creating a relationship where like people would feel that way about government, but maybe a more authentic first step is sort of helping government sort of see the ways that things that they think of as like helping might be actually kind of creating harms, both kind of like deeper, like the big ticket structural like redlining type things, and also like just like, oh, when you repaired this street or when you created this like rezoning, here's the ways that actually totally screwed over my business or whatever. Something like that might be really interesting, and it might be a way that connects both to the Connect and to Los Vecinos. Like I think they each have some pretty interesting stories in that space. I also really resonate with, I think something that came up a few times, is sort of like, is there a service that this particular group can provide, or a document that this particular group would be really well positioned to provide, whether that's like an atlas of like kind of like upcoming like vacant properties, or kind of like, here's these kind of upcoming planning actions that you might not know the ramifications of. But it seems like there might be things that for this group are kind of like a low lift, but would actually be quite useful to groups who don't already have like this particular set of skills on hand. Seems like a really interesting kind of document that would be like for the Connect or for Los Vecinos in terms of like the audience. Like, here's something that you all can use. So, I mean, those are kind of inverse projects that share a lot. You know, it's like one is the same. Here's something for government to look at. Here's something for the Connect to look at, to like know more about like what is the kind of stuff that's going on in that space. I'm also really hearing interesting themes about creating tools for internal decision making or needs assessments. That seems like a really interesting kind of project. I think there's also an interesting project, you know, and I think of that in my mind. I'm making these diagrams of like, if you have government, like local community, and like these organizations, like each project is sort of like, how does it relate to those two things? So it's like, that's sort of like just the organizations coming up with conversations amongst themselves. There's also a way of like, how do we create ways to communicate the models that these organizations are developing out to the communities that they're in, whether that is a tool to bring people into those organizations or just for people to replicate those organizations in a way that makes sense for their own community, but some way to kind of like communicate out that direction seems like really interesting and valuable. So anyway, those are just some of the themes I'm just naming that I've heard in this conversation to kind of foreshadow like where my head is going, I guess, in terms of like setting up sort of macro themes for the teams. Anything else that's coming up for folks that I'll throw out one more, which is, so Colleen was in our group, and as we know, or as you know, we mentioned sort of like a conversation that she had with Kiyomi about sort of these vacant school properties that the city's trying to get rid of. And I do wonder if, in terms of also connecting to something like what Hope, I think, had mentioned, like sometimes like even if it's in a little bit of like a fantasy space, like having kind of like what would your dream house look like is actually a pretty interesting exercise for people to engage in order to figure out what their needs really are. Like, you know, what are the things that, you know, if you had a building, what would you do with it? Could be a really interesting workshop that could help kind of you know, just be an engaging way for people in either of these organizations to kind of start talking about what are the needs and directions that they might want to go in. So that's like another kind of like connection I saw between some of the projects. I'm just like spitballing here, so anyone feel free to jump in.
Sorry, I'm dealing with I'm doing like this. My son is like asking me questions. Rosten, just to add on what you're saying, you know, that might overlap with some of the other comments people made about how zoning and public policy overlap with a nonprofit's ability to take a building or take a project in a particular community and maybe leverage some of the other things that are out there that can help them see their mission, you know, achieve their mission. And I believe both. I know, how far is Connect from the Beltline? Well, she's close to MARTA, right? And all of that. Like, there's just so many things, you know, that overlap when we think about redevelopment and maintaining, you know, sort of the history and cultural context that's authentic to neighborhoods, and how we can help think about how these legacy organizations can not just preserve what they're doing, but show the value through these redevelopments in a monetary way to the city, to developers. You know, I don't know if there's some way of pulling all that together. It's almost like a toolkit or book, you know, and how they get organized with their local NPUs and showing value in the neighborhood. I know that's a whole bunch of randomness, but it's just, there's all these things that go to making sense out of how to help. It's almost like monetize the good things people are doing in communities, so that the capitalism, as you said, Roshani, it has hurt communities, so that it, you know, we can help build a story for why capitalism needs to, when they think about redevelopment, why they need to really put in out front these organizations and the work that they're doing.
Can I ask a general question to all the like government people? What is the benefit of Connect to your work? Or how would you want to, what outcomes would be beneficial to the work that they're doing, to government work?
Yeah, I mean, I can voice how I personally see it. Yeah, I mean, so how Go mentioned, I won't go into the whole zoning weeds with everyone, unfortunately. But what we're looking at right now is in Atlanta, who are building things with a zoning code that was largely created in the 70s, right? And so this is during white flight. This is when Atlanta was competing with the suburbs for people, right? So they had really suburban policies and really like not like geared towards community and local action, but people who maybe the people who are driving these big offices will put their single family homes inside the city limits instead of outside the city limits. So maybe we can get a bunch of single family homes. And that's great if you are someone who owns real estate, office real estate. I don't personally. So a lot of people kind of moved this forward, and it created like a really centralized system where versus smaller businesses that are servicing a smaller community, you get larger businesses that aren't connected with communities, Kroger's, Publix's, Trader Joe's, IKEA's, and even larger developments like we're seeing pop up that aren't really connected to the community. And so as was mentioned, the zoning code rewrite is an opportunity to rethink how buildings look and how they function in the city. And one of these opportunities is creating more or really fewer restrictions towards what you do with your space, with your building that you own, right? With the land that you own. Right now, you can't have a coffee shop in your house. You can't have a business in your house. You have to have commercially zoned property, right? And so the opportunity here is if you want to create a community hub for your neighbors, for your friends, for your bowling league, for your tennis team, your soccer team, your kids' school, parents to hang out and play Monopoly, I don't know, is the first game I could think of. You can do that. Or ideally, you'd be able to do that with the land that you own. And so operating locally creates more, people mention a lot, the culture of your neighborhood, the history, the culture. It's not just like a stagnant thing. It's something that can continue to happen. The story of your community continues to be told, right? And so creating these local spaces that can enhance the local culture and keep more of the local money and local people in the community, like the Connect is doing, right, with their local coffee shop, local artists, kind of a space for people in the community to express themselves and feel safe. One thing I mentioned in my my brief was this is something really similar that they're doing in Mexico City. Their mayor of Mexico City said we have a food crisis, a food access crisis. We have a social crisis. We have a housing crisis. There are a lot of things that can kind of be siloed, but they took it as a way to kind of create coalitions and create these community food kitchens where it's a space inside a community. It is managed / funded by the government, but there are local folks, local people in the space that if you want a warm meal, if you want a space to hang out and relax, I believe there's even housing options there. But versus having larger systems that people are less familiar with, having these smaller kind of nucleus inside each community, I think was just a more effective way to meet the needs of the community. So yeah, that was kind of how I see the role of these smaller cooperative, local businesses and spaces and communities. and how there's kind of a small opportunity to rethink how they're allowed in Atlanta and elsewhere. Yeah.
Great question, Gavin. Great question. Great answer, Stephen. Other government people have an answer for Gavin? Other thoughts on how the Connect is like valuable to them?
I was thinking like really a little bit more, I guess like broadly, whereas like small area plans and comprehensive planning is like a really big part of like long range planning. And usually like the idea is that you have the community come and engage and speak and like give their input for what that needs to look like in the future. And like there's clearly systemic issues and why that's not always the most representative, but really thinking about like how within those models, like that individual community, especially with small area plans, is supposed to be the stakeholder, and how something like the Connect that already has such deep connections to the community can really get people out, really get their input in there, and to have like the best input from the most important stakeholders within that community. Maybe not the most on topic, but
Yes, Haven. Like exactly. Like for a long range planner like myself, someone like the Connect is like so absolutely vital because we as the government are not always trusted, especially by the communities that we're actively trying to help here in 2024 to like repair some like past wrongs that the government has perpetrated. And so like a lot of the communities we want to talk to the most don't want to talk to us when we're planning for the future. But we rely on organizations like the Connect who have already built that trust. We build the trust with an organization like Connect. And then through them, we're able to connect with the community and build trust and kind of repair relationships there.
Is there a way to put a value on stakeholders? Because you're talking about time and resources, right?
Yeah, a new best practice is to at least provide stipends for people who are participating. It's not always possible. It's not always in the budget. Unfortunately, there's lots of ways that like the government finance structure gets in the way of us being allowed to do that. So it's really a entity to entity situation, like between government entities. But best practice is to at least give stipends to particularly like disenfranchised folks for participating, or to at least provide free food and or childcare. Or if none of that, like if the stipend isn't possible, then like trying to also provide a benefit without just extracting information. So that's where I'm thinking like, even if we like did some sort of, I don't know. Anyway, my brain is going off, but yeah.
That was helpful. Thank you.
I can be a little more cynical too. I mean, the ideal is like that was before, the input for the community, you can get there. But sometimes it's more like also, if you already have a per concept idea, it's like how this community can support you. You know, we presented less options too. So it's kind of like they will kind of pre-move them to support something that has been kind of predetermined, instead that from the beginning really ask them. And this is sometimes so.
All right. So, really rich conversation going in a lot of directions. What we're going to do at this moment is I think we're going to take a little short bio break until about 4:50. And then when we return, we're going to do some duo reflections. So you guys are going to be thrown into a room with one of your classmates, and you'll do some reflection and checking in together that I will explain after this bio break. Does that sound good to y'all? Okay, so feel free to peace out. Check back with you in 10. Hello, hello. Welcome back. Are people back? Feel free to give me like some sort of visual cue to let me know you're in the room. All right, I appreciate the enthusiasm, Nicole. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do now for a little bit. There's sort of two levels to this next exercise, I guess. So essentially what I'm gonna do is send you all into groups of two, where you will maybe get to know each other as individuals a little bit more than you've been able to thus far, and have a little chat about like, what exactly are you up to? What are you thinking about? What is exciting to you, and how is this work kind of connecting with like your life as you live it outside of this class? And then the other piece, and there's sort of two things that we want to get out of that. I mean, one is, hopefully, the joy of connection for yourselves, but we also want to be able to kind of use this space to kind of get a sense of like, how can we tweak the remaining time we have in this class to kind of best serve you? So are there things that are coming up of like, this is working for me, this is not? These are questions I have about how this is going. And then lastly, next week, you'll be sort of meeting a bunch of sort of organizations that are connected or affiliated with the Connect. And they had a curiosity of like, what are the things that this group is mostly interested in? So part of this, we're going to try to boil down and give to them to sort of give a snapshot of like, here's what this group is thinking about. So they can kind of like best make sure to kind of address some of those questions when they kind of present their own work to you all. Does that make sense? But essentially, it's just a space for you to talk to one another and yeah, get into, I think my prompt, I'm going to type it into this, the meeting group chat right now. Hold on. So put it in there. So how are the themes of this class showing up for you in your own life and work right now? What are you most curious about right now? And then the last bonus question, you don't have to get to it, is sort of like just generally what's going well or not so well in this class for you. So I'm gonna send, and I guess my request would be that if you all could take turns being note takers, and you don't have to use your name or anything like that. You can just type in like just whatever the main themes of whatever the person you're talking to is saying, just type it into this this area that I'm making called one-on-one chats. So we can sort of get a little taste of what you all are talking about in your groups. Does that sound good? And then when you come back, Roshani and I will have magically assembled you into teams, and we'll basically spend the remainder of this class kind of coming up with like our, what we want to do this week to kind of build prototypes. All right.
That's great. I rejoined on a different like device. Would you send the link to the page again that we're taking notes on?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Thank you for speaking up. Okay, there's our Rise Up pad one more time. Okay. So Gina, send people away into their duos.
Can you just say how long we're planning to be in the groups?
I think 15 minutes. I kind of feel like it'll be more, it's gonna be so fun to talk to each other that you'll want more, but whatever. 15 minutes.
Great. Bye. That was exciting. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Oh no, it was just getting good.
No, it was just getting good. Send us back.
Take me back.
Good, that's the feeling we want. Leave them wanting more. Now you have to, if you guys, now you used to hang out in real life. If you were like enjoying the conversation, there's only one solution. All right. Thank you so much for um, for getting to spend some time. I always find that's a really nice way to use Zoom. It's because you just really don't get to like teleport into somebody else's living room like that very often. So it can be fun to get to know someone. Um, but it's over now. Now we're back. And so here's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to do something that Roshi and I just decided we were going to do slightly differently while you all were talking. So what we did while you were talking is we wrote up sort of 7 sort of like little mini briefs, sort of directions to go. They're in the top of the Rise Up pad. And what we thought we'd do is instead of us trying to assign groups like we did last time, we're just going to let you all read them and then just sign up for whichever one sounds interesting to you, and we'll sort of figure out what, we'll just use that, people's natural inclinations and interests to form the groups. The one caveat, and we can do this after you have a chance to like look at them and sign up, is that we want to make sure that there's at least one artist in each group. So we might have to do a little bit of reshuffling at the very end, but I think generally just like look over into the Rise Up pad. You should see a thing at the top that just says briefs and groups, and they're numbered 1 through 7. This is sort of my attempt, or whatever, Roshi and I's combined Rise Up pad attempt to describe some different types of projects. I'll just read them out for the group now, but essentially just write your name underneath it. So that's an example of what that might look like. So first, spreading the word about Connect or Los Vecinos as both specific organizations and places that people could visit or join, and also as models that people could learn from or replicate. And the audience for this would be the immediate communities kind of around these organizations, kind of spreading the word locally. Second project is creating a brief about how government has created problems for local communities as a way to help government start shifting its approach. And the idea is this would be sort of government workers would be the audience for this. The third is how do you kind of create something that would communicate either opportunities or give warnings to community organizations about planning stuff that's upcoming. So like it's a rezoning, or here's an interesting opportunity. Different, you can imagine this as like, what is a toolkit that would help us communities like get a school building look like, or what is a brief about kind of like threats that might be posed by a new zone. The fourth is a tool for kind of internal goal setting or needs assessment. So this could maybe use a spatial model or a charrette. So like an example is like, if you had a school building, what would you do with it? If you create an exercise using that as the center, would that be a way to kind of help people who are part of the Connect or Los Vecinos imagine the future, what they want to do? The fifth is some sort of internal decision-making tool for distributing resources like time that doesn't use money. So something that would like the issue that Gavin brought up about how do you schedule these small conference rooms? Like what would that solution look like to help people make decisions internally? The sixth one, make a narrative about how local organizations and local investments contribute to culture, and the audience would be for government or nonprofit. So this is kind of a more pointed version of, or maybe not more pointed, but a version of what Gavin was asking, like, what is the true value of an organization like Connect? How do we think about that? And how would you communicate that effectively to people who might not understand how much value these organizations contribute? Last one is imagining some sort of summit between an organization like Los Vecinos and the Connect. So what would that look like to get those organizations together? And like how would they communicate with each other, or how would you capture the best practices that come out of that? Okay, those are the 7. And obviously, as with any of these are just like my initial like hunches. Your group is gonna kind of take them and spin them off into whatever direction you find most interesting. So take a couple minutes to write your names. If you're having trouble entering the Rise Up pad and want us to write your name in there somewhere, let us know, or text us or whatever. But I'm just gonna let people do that for a minute.
And can I just ask, since we made these decisions, is there anything that's missing? Does this feel good for everybody? We tried to capture what were in the brief documents and the discussions. So it seems like people are signing up. Cool.
I just love watching this document get populated. I don't know what it is. Just so like satisfying.
And if you sign up for more than one, please indicate like first choice or alternative. Some people are already doing that.
Okay, and then at 5:20, Gina's gonna send you all away for a half hour, and then we'll come back and do a little debrief before we go.
I'll send you away so nothing.
And Rosten and I will be hopping into your groups, just like checking in during your group process if you have questions or things like that. And then we'll have 10 minutes as like a full share out, as he said.
Cool.
CCD Griffin. Dolly. No galleta.
Okay. This is it's a real math problem for Gina. Sorry. But it looks like everybody's in now, right? And we can just
5 is a little slim, y'all.
that's okay. I mean, slim and streamlined.
I'm so sorry. I cannot find this look what I have to sign. Sorry. Where
Oh,
I
you're looking
need
for
to sign.
the
I
document? Oh,
completely
yeah.
lost.
Eleanor just dropped in the chat again. You can drop in there and you'll see all the stuff.
Are you in the res up tab, Mishira?
Yes.
Okay, so it's at the very top.
Okay. Good.
Gina, is there a way I can support you? I know it's kind of complex now.
No, but just talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
Can I add one thing? Remember when the skate park had a immediate need, and that's how we decided kind of collectively how we should work. I think, you know, the Connect isn't here today, and so we're gonna get more information when we get feedback from them. So I just see like some folks are really interested in some things and some are not. So think of it as like an exercise, even if you want to like grow in something. It seems like everybody wants a summit, but like the Connect might just like be like, oh, we don't need a summit. We actually need like a toolkit or something. So just wanted to throw out that there is a community behind this thing.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think one of the things is like, you know, what we're gonna be doing is making prototypes, and just a reminder, like, I think of design and making a prototype as a way to research, you know, so we'll make things and then we'll show them to the community and they might be like, oh, this is definitely what we need, or that might be this is definitely not what we need. And both responses are totally valuable, and we'll figure out kind of how to adjust from there, but it's very unlikely that we'll make anything where it's like, oh, that's perfect, we'll just do that. At this stage, especially, what we're doing is just sort of trying to create like kind of a provocation, something to figure out, like, what is the real need here?
One of the things that in the group we discussed and you mentioned was that, what about is these models can be applied to the artist community?
Right.
And we didn't talk about that. It also is not reflected of any of in these areas. So like how this model can benefit the artist community. So
Totally.
it was not reflected here. So.
Question.
Yeah, and I guess, and I would say to that, like, feel free to like just run off on your own, you know, from whatever the prompt is originally. Like, if your group takes it in a different direction, or you kind of take it in a different direction, that's okay. None of this is like in stone. And Gina, I would say you can just send people up and we'll kind of like adjust if needed, but they don't have to be like totally perfectly balanced groups or anything like that. They can have different numbers of people or, you know.
Okay, I think I've got a good idea of where people are supposed to go. I'm changing the names of the groups so people know which topic they are going to be in. And once I finish that, I'll send you up.
Awesome.
I will start sending people off.
Bye, y'all.
Welcome back. Everyone will be here in 2 seconds.
It's just you now, guys.
Welcome, everyone.
Actually, can you finish your thought in chat?
Yeah.
That was
Sorry
so
for
good.
that.
Please
I know
finish.
it's always like jarring to come back. And we just have like a little tiny minute before and people are gonna have to start, I'm sure, getting on with the rest of their night. But I wanted to sort of just do a quick share out if people could just sort of say like one thing about kind of a direction or question or just something about what their group started going with. And we could do it in group order. I can just call on group 1. People remember what groups they were in. Group 1 was like spreading the word. Just like a sentence, really.
That's Amita, Hiroko, or Tyrone.
Yes, that we talked about, we talked about words failing me now. We talked about like ways to like activate the exterior space, whether that's already getting into like existing events that are happening, like activate like local college level organizations, thinking about like step shows, historically activated spaces in the way in which the West End has been activated, homecoming parades, things like that, street cleanup days, generally. But yeah, we're gonna do some more research, go there tomorrow, be able to like nail down something.
Fantastic. Okay, group 2, brief about how government has created problems.
Gavin, Jennifer, or Steven.
Yeah, I can pop in and say the big thing we talked about was power mapping. Shout out to Eleanor for kind of wrapping it up in that term. Thinking about the community members who are kind of most and least resourced and least likely to act. And then thinking about that's connected to kind of who are the players, and then who are we trying to tell the story to, and then thinking about how we can tell the story in an engaging way in a sentence.
Great. Group 3, how to communicate to communities about planning stuff.
Yeah, well, one way that I'm a planner, so one way that we found very effective when we come to informing the community about any upcoming planning product is to actually meet them where they are. And so we discussed having a setup at the local grocery store or local library where we can share planning processes.
Nice. So like a bit about kind of like the setting for how to do it. Okay. Number 4, creating a tool for internal needs assessment, goal setting, shredding, etc.
Nicole, you want to share since you're our note taker?
So we discussed coming up with a conceptual design, possibly for a school. If we got it, then how would it be activated? But in order to do that, we need feedback from the community. So how do we get their input? So we were discussing, what kind of tool would work best for that.
Awesome. Okay. Group number 5, internal decision-making tools for distributing resources, such as time and space.
So the group zeroed in on the problem that Gavin raised, which is how do folks at the Connect reserve time in those 2 rooms? And so the idea that came up was an online calendar that allows its community members to reserve the space. A question came up about multi-generational businesses and seniors, maybe that system won't be accessible to them. So making sure that there's a support system there so that they understand how to leverage that system. Also thinking about this calendar as a way to expose the members themselves and their businesses. And maybe just a thought that came to mind was like, the members, as they're signing up for time in these spaces, their profile is brought up and their business is included. And so all of this time reservation is kind of done in the larger context of all the businesses that are incubating within the space. So there's more visibility across the members. So that's kind of where we landed. I don't know if Marissa or Jackie wanted to add, but or sorry, Nicole.
That's great. Okay, now crafting a narrative about how local organizations contribute to the culture. Group 6. Questions, next steps. You wrote a long narrative in the doc, which I'm excited about.
I guess I shall speak. So our idea was to create a mini documentary, but instead of it being about why the Connect is valuable, we wanted to base it off of their mission against displacement. Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess question is, what would be a deliverable, I guess, for a prototype for that?
Yeah. Maybe like a storyboard. We can connect. We'll connect about it.
Okay.
But awesome. Okay. So number 7, our last group. I know we're a little bit over time, but imagining a summit. When I dropped in, like people were kind of like shying away from the term summit, but imagining some sort of event between Los Vecinos and Connect. Anyone want to speak on that?
I can speak toward it. I guess we talked about the idea of having, or the goal of having Los Vecinos and the Connect talk to one another, be in a shared space and exchange knowledge, camaraderie, healing together. We discussed the format of a summit might be a little bit too hierarchical and formal. and we should be attentive to the ways that they're conducting their conversations already. We noticed that a lot of that has surrounded around sharing of food and meals, and maybe that the structure of this event or summit takes place around shared shared cultural food co-collaboration. So we're kind of unclear on like some of the logistics, but like Roshani said when she dropped in, there's a big conversation and umbrella that they share together, and having them in the same space could yield a lot of organic benefit that we don't necessarily know now, but could just create the platform for.
Right on. Okay, so that's all 7 groups. Everyone got a little taste of where those conversations led. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this brief since it's over time, but basically next week we're gonna meet again with the Connect in present. And we're gonna kind of present like really rapid prototypes of what we were thinking. And again, the goal here, even though obviously, there's always an impulse to want to impress the client or whatever, but the goal is not so much to be able to come up with something that's like bulletproof, but something that just explains kind of like a direction that gives people enough to react to in some way or another, to see, is there a seed here that is exciting? That's all. That's the only level of polish that we're really looking for, is just to sort of see like, is there a potential here? How does it need to shift? What are the, make some assumptions and then see if those assumptions are right. We'll be sending out sort of like a more clear description, but because you've already been through this once and did amazing work, I'm really confident that you all will produce something really valuable for next week. Roshani, is there any other announcements we need to make before we go?
Thanks, Rosten. Yeah, quickly, so class is going to be a little shorter next week because we're going to use the bulk of it to share our prototypes. I think everybody, like Sarah, you had wondered like if you're doing a documentary. I think just sharing anything that's could be a drawing, could be storyboard, it doesn't have to be like, it could be like a little video too. But I think that process of like from idea to reality, that's what we're looking for, so that other people can understand. So next week we have an optional happy hour community town hall. It's gonna be fucking amazing. We have the guild there, we have the self-help credit union, we have Metro Atlanta Land Bank, and we have the Connect. Y'all will all have the opportunity to be in these small groups and connect with them, and thinking about how does collective ownership actually work on the West End, because all of them are located there, and what are the components needed for this holistic conversation. So we need like financing, we need like housing, we need like community support and incubators. So please, please, please come. There will be food and non-alcoholic drinks because we are government, but there's like a bar close to them. Anyway, and it's gonna be from 5:30 to 7:30, and I highly recommend that you can come. You should have a calendar invite for it. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for making the space and the time, as always. I will see you soon. Be in touch by email or whatever works for you.
And thank you, Rosten. Great class. Happy Halloween.
Yeah.
Thank you. Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.